Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. I like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. Today, I'm talking to Kathleen, a writer and single mom who transformed 6 acres of Vermont farmland into something much more profound than a business strategy. What began as a practical solution, making the land pay for itself after moving from affluent Marin County to rural Vermont, has evolved into a masterclass in heart-centered hospitality and the radical act of leading with generosity of spirit. From the community barn raising that erected her yurt to the profound connection she's discovered through hosting strangers, Kathleen's story challenges everything we think we know about successful hospitality. She's created a unicorn experience not through Egyptian cotton sheets or high-end finishes, but through intentionality, care, and what she calls tending, the art of creating spaces where people can exhale into beauty and belonging. In our conversation, we explore how suffering can deepen our capacity for connection, why clear is kind when setting boundaries, and how generosity of spirit can transform both host and guest. We'll discuss the difference between transactional and relational hosting, why Target sheets can create luxury experiences, and how our current culture's emphasis on protection over connection might be keeping us from the very experiences we crave most. Whether you're just starting your hosting journey or questioning how to maintain heart in an increasingly competitive market, this conversation offers a different path. One that suggests the way we show up is what determines what comes back to us, and that maybe, just maybe, most people are good at their core. Let's do it. Kathleen, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you. So glad to be here.
I love your glasses.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay, I want to dive into the meat of this, but I think before I do that, because I have a feeling once we go there, we're probably not going to come back out. I do want people to have an idea of just where you're located, what your property is, how long you've been doing this. So why don't you give us like a little intro, and then I will guide us into where we go from there.
Okay, great. Well, we have a small 6-acre farm in just outside the village of Putney, Vermont, which is in southern Vermont. The largest big town is Brattleboro, about 15 minutes away. And I moved there with my 2 then school-aged children in 2016 from California and wanted to find a way to make the land pay for itself. So we added a yurt and remodeled an existing structure into a little 1-bedroom cottage. And they've both just done so well. And we've been welcoming guests there since 2019, I think.
Okay, so you've been doing this for 6 years. So you're not new to this. When you say we, I'm curious, you have 2 daughters, correct? Yeah. So at that point, since they're out of the house now, they probably would have been high school age when you moved there.
One was in high school and one was in middle school.
But that's old enough to like really have an idea of what's going on. And they, in some ways, were hosting whether they wanted to or not. I'm curious what role they played in that when you all made that move into kind of setting it up, establishing it, and then later the hospitality side of it.
Oh, what a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that. Well, initially, let's see. The older daughter is an adventurer, and she left soon after we started hosting and worked with refugees as a teenager in Eastern Europe. So she wasn't really here for most of it.
Okay.
My younger daughter was, and she completely helped us set it up. We had sort of an old-fashioned barn raising to erect the yurt, which was amazing. The man who makes our yurt is named Ken Gagnon, and the company is Two Girls Yurts out of New Hampshire. And so he creates the whole thing, and then he brings the parts, and you have all of your friends and family and whomever wants to come waiting, and you do this sort of barn raising and put it together. And she had a lot of friends there, so we had a big meal, and that was a great way for her to be involved.
Yeah.
Later, in terms of the hospitality part with both girls, because my older daughter came and went. Initially, we all had reservations because, like, what's it going to be like to have people on our land and in our space and, walking by our windows perhaps. And, we all were slightly nervous about what that might be. Would it feel random? Would it feel strange?
Right.
I would say that I unequivocally have been struck by how not random and how not strange it's been. It's actually been beautiful. And I could say more about that later. I would say that Anna, my youngest, there were times where she was always super hospitable and welcoming. And there were times where she had some mixed feelings about it and she would have liked more privacy.
Yeah. Which I feel like that is a very common feeling for high schoolers, even in a house with their own family.
Completely.
So then you
Yes.
add this element into it and it's like, okay, I'm feeling that even more.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can I ask a question about the barn raising?
Yeah.
Was this your idea or was this how he does it? Like he suggests that you do it this way because you need help and here's kind of a fun way to do that? Or how did that idea? I grew up near Amish country. So this is like a very familiar idea that I think is really beautiful, but yet no one in my community has ever done it. And so I'm just curious who suggested that.
Ken suggested it. And although he never said this to me, what I know about Ken, because I have connections with him through a wilderness expedition school that my kids were involved with called Croca, is that he's very much grounded in community values and community life and in relational experiences. And he and or his wife have come a number of times since we raised the yurt to repair things or replace things. And, often we've done, like I've divided perennials and they've taken perennials with them. And we've just had this flow of just kind of community connection with them over time. And I think that the barn raising is a reflection of his way of being in the world, which is very much connected to community.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting because it feels like that connection to community is where we came from, right? Like everyone, I can't really speak for Europe, but at least I taught US history. When people came here, we had small communities. There was no national government. It was just figuring out how in our community do we survive. In a lot of cases in New England, it's like survive in a rough winter. We really depend on each other. It is in our blood. That is like what we did. And yet we've gotten so far from that that even the idea of a barn raising feels a little bit foreign to me.
I so hear that. And until a few years ago, I would have been right there with you. One of the amazing things that I've learned about since moving from beautiful and very almost grievously affluent Marin County, north of San Francisco, to a small town in Vermont, is that some of that community life lives on. And I remember when we first moved, and I was a solo mother for all of my girls' lives. My husband died when, many years ago when the oldest was little, and I adopted the second girl on my own. And I was used to being pretty scrappy and, having to figure things out. And I had great community in California. And yet, when I got to Vermont, what I was struck by is people naturally helped one another. And I remember getting a basketball hoop from Dick's Sporting Goods and getting it home because Anna, my youngest, loved basketball. They both love basketball. And I was totally stymied on putting this thing together. And a new friend just casually came over and put it together with me. And it's not that that wouldn't have happened in California, but what I have noticed over time is the things that people paid for in my affluent community in California, in my small, more modest town in Vermont, people help each other because there's not as much extra income and there's not as many services And so
Yeah.
you show up for your neighbors more naturally. And I've seen it over and over again.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Because I was thinking to myself, I've never participated in a barn raising, but I did renovate my first house when I was in my 20s and I wasn't making a lot of money. And I remember when my IKEA kitchen got delivered in 152 boxes. And I was like, holy shit.
Oh,
Like, this seemed like a good idea because it was more affordable than other cabinets. And what I did was I just sent out an email and we created a competition. You paired up in teams, you put together cabinets, whoever won got a prize, and everybody got pizza and
amazing.
beer, right? But that's kind of, it's not a barn raising, but it's kind of the same idea. And to your point, what it was born out of was that I was poor. Like I couldn't hire someone to do it. So either I put together all of these or I reached out to my community and asked for help. But the older I've gotten, the more money that my friends and I make, the less we ask for help because we will just hire someone to do it, right? Because it almost feels like, well, if I have the money to pay for it, why would I ask my friends to donate their time? But we're missing something that happens when we ask, I think.
100%. And part of my connection with the Wilderness Expedition School that I mentioned, which is called Croca, is that I've watched, by being in relationship with them and their founders for many years,
Mm,
the natural way that people lean into one another. And an example of that is work days. People have work days
mm,
on the land at Croca, and my
mhm.
friends from Croca come to me, especially over the last few years, and we have a work day on my land once a year at least. And it's an amazing, remarkable thing that I wouldn't have thought of in California, where we knock out all this
Yeah,
stuff that I can't do on my own with
yeah,
many hands. And then we share a meal and we share time together. And it's pretty beautiful.
yeah. I actually read somewhere, and I'm not going to remember any of the details, but it was like a study that was done that said friendships are strengthened, not necessarily when well, how does it go? It's like when we ask for help, we think that we're inconveniencing someone, but being asked for help actually strengthens your feelings of friendship. So, of course, I'm sure for the person receiving, it strengthens that feeling. But what was interesting to me about the research was that it also showed the strengthening of the relationship on the giving side. So we all hesitate to ask because we're like, I don't want to inconvenience. But in reality, what it does is it makes that person feel valuable. It gives them purpose and it strengthens that relationship. But we all still don't ask. At least I don't. Let me speak for myself.
I think it's hard for all of us to receive. I know it's really hard for me, and yet I try and do what you're describing so beautifully, which is to remember how good it feels when I help somebody.
Yeah.
It feels so good. It
Yeah.
just and when we let people help us or we ask people to help us, we're giving them that gift
Yes.
of
Yes.
the, as you said, purpose.
Yeah, yeah. It makes me wonder how, because I believe strongly in housewarmings, just this idea of like filling a space with the people who bring positive energy to you. And so like bring that into the space and that sets the tone for the life that will be lived there.
Hmm.
And I feel like the barn raising is another example of doing that from the very beginning, creating that intention for your retreat. And I'm wondering how that has played out in the culture that has become part of your hospitality and people's experiences staying there.
What a great question. Well, I don't know that it's played out in a conscious or intended way, but I think that ethos of connection, of interdependence, of uh, slowing down and looking at the person across
Mhm.
from you, I think that has become a foundational, if not the foundational value that I bring to welcoming people to our
Yeah.
land. You
Yeah.
know, I'm genuinely glad that they're there. And I think it comes through in how I approach them, talk to them, write to them, show up for them, give
Yeah.
them space, create beauty or rest or whatever it is that's needed. Um, I think people feel that when you show
Yeah.
up in that way.
Yeah. This is something that I think is beautiful about as much as I get frustrated with Airbnb and their cancellation policy changes this week just pissed me off again. As much as that happens, there is still a part of me that is such a big believer in it because it fundamentally shifted the way we think about travel and the way we think about hospitality. And what I'm seeing in your story is this idea of like you got into it because you're like, how do we make use of this land and make it more affordable for us to live here? But then you kind of stumbled into this like superpower that you have of hosting with heart, which I think a lot of us say, and it's kind of like a catchphrase or whatever, but like actually doing it is what I want to talk about because I think you kind of stumbled into that. And so I think Airbnb has actually brought people into the hospitality space in a roundabout way. And maybe I'm not right, but tell me, like, did you ever go into this thinking like, oh, I think I have a desire to explore hospitality? Was that ever a thought, or was it just like, let's try this and see what happens?
It wasn't a thought. If I'm really honest, as much as, yeah, if I'm really honest, the original intention was I'm going from a 5,000 square foot lot in California on which my house, was sitting and took up almost all of that space to 6 acres with multiple structures. And it seemed like this embarrassment of riches, this giant piece of land. And I had a twofold motivation. One was, how do I make this land pay for itself? Because it's such a resource. How can I use it? And the other, and it was secondary, was this land needs to be shared and people should be coming and going in a place like this that's so beautiful with so much nature and birds and trees and fields. It didn't feel right to have one family take up all that space. So I didn't go in with this idea that it would be this deeply connecting or meaningful situation. I mostly, it seemed pretty practical. How can I make money?
Yeah.
And it seems right to have a flow of people coming and going, which is somewhat relational. But I have been surprised to discover that it's been so much more than that.
Yeah. How long did it take for you to realize that it was, oh, this is going to be something different than what I had thought?
Like a week.
Oh, immediately. Was there a
Right
moment?
away, right away. There was not a particular moment. What there uh, was watching or reading or hearing the response that my guests had when they arrived or when they, reflected back to me what their experience was like. And this is going to sound kind of sappy, but there was so much love and emotion in the interactions. Some people had actual tears in their eyes when they thanked me. Like I had multiple people, mostly women, say to me, when I walked in, I just felt like this huge exhale. And I'm so grateful to be in a place that feels so calm and beautiful and nourishing. And as different facets of those kinds of ideas kept coming to me through, different guests and different conversations and different reviews, I realized, oh, this isn't just paying the mortgage or, making the land pay for itself or sharing it. This is really a service that means something.
Yeah.
And then I got excited because
Yeah.
that's a whole lot more than a check from Airbnb.
Yeah. Yeah. It feels different. I mean, that's what we all want. We all think we want money because it buys us freedom and security and all those things. But like, what does the research say? You hit 75K, which maybe needs to be a little bit higher now because of inflation, but then your happiness has no correlation to wealth. So it really isn't about that. So if you can use your property to find you that stability, but then stumble into this other thing that's so much more meaningful, like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I
What's
think people are
what's greater
surprised
than
by it
that?
though. Yeah. Did you then, was there something in your brain then that switched and you were like, okay, how do I make this even better? And like, did you start to nerd out on hospitality or did you have everything you already needed to do this well?
Well, that's a great, you ask great questions. I don't think I nerded out in a cognitive way. I don't think I went out and did a bunch of research or looked at how other people were doing it. I think what I did do was really double down on the heart-centered experience that people seem to be having and
Yeah.
really lean into it.
Yeah.
And it just, of course, over time, we fine-tuned things and we've corrected and pivoted here and there, or made it, made things that were missing better or different. But really, it's been quite natural. It's
Yeah.
just unfolded in a really organic, lovely way.
Yeah. I think what happens, I'm going to guess, I don't know if this is true or not, but I like observing what people notice about other people. I really became interested in this when I was dating actively in like my mid 30s. And I was like, I viewed it as like a sociology experiment. So I studied people's question asking and I studied their observation. And I studied when they would reflect something back to me about myself, what things felt really good and what things actually didn't, right? And what I took out of that was that when someone acknowledges something about us that we don't really value, like it might be true, like, oh, maybe I have nice hair or whatever, right? And someone says, oh, your hair is beautiful. It means nothing to me because I just don't value hair in general. But if they say you ask great questions, well, that matters to me. So suddenly you feel that deep inside and that inspires you to keep doing that more. So I'm
Mm.
wondering if in that first week when you started to have guests, they were actually seeing the parts of you that mattered the most. And then it just like fuels you. You're like, oh, this is exactly what I wanted this to be. Let me do more of that.
Yeah, thank you. What's coming up for me when I hear you say that is I'm suddenly remembering that one of the things I've always really loved to do, and frankly loved about myself, was to create beauty at home for my
Mhm.
family. My version of beauty, right? Beauty is obviously a subjective thing.
Yeah.
But I always believed when I was raising my girls that if I thought of home as almost an expansion of our bodies, and that if home could feel, a word I often used was harmonized, if there was a feeling of
Mm,
harmony there, and there was beauty and goodness and tending, that would affect how people felt inside their own
yeah.
bodies and
Yeah.
how we related to one another.
Uh,
It's not 100% of family life, but it's a really big piece to
yeah.
it. So when I made these two spaces, I extended that thing that I just took such delight in, which was to create beauty, not just from a visual standpoint, but a felt
Yeah.
standpoint, and share it with others. And when I heard back, as you just offered to me in that beautiful image, when I got compliments or recognition, yes, I felt so seen, and I realized, oh, this is a perfect match between what I have to
Yeah.
offer and what I'm doing. And how often in life is there that kind of, alignment? Not
Yeah.
so often. And
Yeah.
that's been really a great aspect of this for me.
Yeah. And that self-awareness sometimes is hard, especially for women. I think it's hard to say out loud something I love about myself. So, first, to even discover what those things are, because the world is so constantly telling us what's not good enough so that we buy a product or do a thing. So, it's hard. Step one, it's hard to actually figure out, wait, what are the things that I love about myself? But then to have someone reflect that back to you helps to build that confidence where then you're like, wait, I am great at that. Let me do more. Let me own that and like lead with that in a way that maybe we wouldn't have at the beginning. And it is kind of a gift of Airbnbs that we get feedback and reviews and guest books. Very few other places in our life does someone come to visit you at your house and write you a note afterwards telling you everything they loved about it.
Completely. Yes. And
Yeah.
to that point, you've said a few things about Airbnb, and it's really easy to shoot arrows their way. And of course, there's things that could be done differently or better, and we all have to adjust every year as things change. But I have to say, I remain really grateful to them
Yeah.
And
Me
I
too.
kind of think of it the way I thought of my girls' schools growing up. If I'm 80% happy, I'm just going to keep quiet because they've
Yeah.
created this platform for connection, for income streams, for traveling differently. And thank you, Airbnb. I'm really
Right.
grateful.
Right. And even if you use direct booking, there's still a role there that Airbnb played in like starting it in the first place. Because I think very few of us would start a rental space and go straight to direct booking because that feels like, oh, I'm starting a business, which is a very scary jump. But if you start, oh, all I have to do is throw it up on Airbnb and if nothing happens, it's fine. Like that feels very different.
A
I
hundred
also think,
percent.
yeah, I also think that people who still value Airbnb tend to be those of us who started or still are hosting in person. Because I'm not hosting in person anymore, but I started in the guest room of my house for 2 years, that daily interaction with folks. And I felt the same way you did, very nervous and like, oh, this is an opportunity, but what will it be like having someone in the morning when I'm getting my coffee walk out of their bedroom? And it took like a week to be like, oh, this is beautiful, the human interaction. And you get to have that too, because you live on property.
Well, I think what you're saying is a great example of how we can be afraid of something in our mind. And then when we experience it or experience the person, we really remember all the lovely things about others.
Yeah.
I will say that. And then secondly, I am an in-person host. And for the last couple of years, I've been spending a third of each year in Nepal. So I've had this new experience of trying to manage things from afar. And it is different. It is
Yeah.
more challenging.
Yeah.
It's a lot less relational. And while it worked just fine, and I had great support at home mostly through my co-host. It's better to be there in person, I think, for
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody.
Was it as rewarding when you were from a
No,
distance?
no,
Yeah.
more
That's what I suspect.
transactional.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what I wish more people knew because I think a lot of folks who listen to this have never thought about hosting in person. And I would just push folks to just consider, do you have a guest room that you could throw up? Or just because I do think there aren't many opportunities in our daily life where we interact with strangers. Like not a hi at the grocery store, how are you doing? Have a good day, but really interact with them. And regardless of what they believe, so much of our circle is cultivated by shared beliefs or shared interests. And
Mm.
so I feel like these strangers, if someone who happens to be coming to Durham, North Carolina, we might have nothing in common. And so what does that week or 2 nights look like that you will be interacting with one another? What can you learn? Where can you be pushed or challenged? And how can you learn the goodness of people, even if you might be very different?
Yeah, and coming up against your bias that you might
Yeah.
have when you meet people. I've had all kinds of people from all kinds of backgrounds and all kinds of places, and you notice some judgments or pre-existing ideas that might be in I have noticed, I should speak for
Hmm.
myself, in my mind. And then so often I just have to laugh at myself because they turn out to just be made up.
Yeah. Yeah. I want to go back really quick to something that you were saying about how you realized really quickly that you were creating these powerful experiences for people where it wasn't just about beautiful decor, it was about what it made them feel. Do you think that can be taught? Like, could you
Mm.
even offer us tips if you wanted to, or do you think it's just intuitive?
Well, I think it can definitely be taught because I think it's just a fact that human beings run on love and connection. And some of us, all of us at one time or another, have had our hearts hurt or wounded, and we've created layers of protection over our wounds. And those things tend to distance us from other people. And we all have that. We all have our
Yeah.
stories of how, life has been hard at times.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the sort of meta tip that I might offer is that when we can rest in our heart, dwell in our heart, come back to our most loving, tender selves, we then show up that way. And we all know
Mm.
the way that we show up and what we put out is what comes back to us
Yeah.
just about all the time. And
Yeah.
so that's a pretty umbrella, broad brush response. And I might have some more granular things that I could come up with. But truly, if one leads from the heart, things tend to work out better in this arena, maybe in all arenas.
Yeah. So Kathleen, it sounds like your tip on creating spaces with good feeling is to go to therapy. Is that true? To heal our own scars so that we can better create that warmth for other people.
Therapy's awesome. I've had a ton of it. And hard times help too.
Yeah.
My husband died and then my partner died,
Oh,
in later years. And my mom died 6 months before my husband, and I had a 2-year-old, and all these things were just, wrenching, and I fell apart on every level. And while that is part of my story and part of my wounds, and I certainly have patterns in me that don't serve me out of those experiences, for the most part, all of that suffering has helped me to come into relationship with what really matters for me in my life.
yeah.
And that's what therapy basically does
Yeah.
for us too, I think.
If you're dreaming about a cabin build, or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build costs and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there. You said something beautiful in your pre-interview, and I should give people the context that you are also a writer. So I might read a couple of the things that you wrote because they're really beautiful. But you said, and this
Thanks.
is something that came up in one other podcast episode, and that's it out of 100 some. And so I think this is, but I remember being so captivated when I heard it. You said the way your business takes care of you when you take care of people, the divine nature of beauty, and how being in and with beauty can heal, soothe, and restore us, which we've touched on some of that. I'm really interested in the way your business takes care of you, because the thing about hosting guests is that we are still real humans who may have gone through a lot of trauma in our life, might be going through it right at this very moment when we are still expected to welcome people to our spaces with our whole heart. And that's really hard. And so I guess I'd love to hear about any times where you have put so much of yourself into this space, any times where the space or the people there have taken care of you.
Hmm. Gosh, there's so many. Well, I could answer two different levels come up for me in response to your question.
Mm-hmm.
One is when people arrive, I try and catch them just spontaneously, organically, and say a quick hello. People don't want to, in general, people are not there to get to know their host. And I want to
Yeah.
give people lots of space. And at the same time, that quick hello sort of I find grounds the experience and reassures them that they're with a safe person, a person that is glad they're there, and that
Yeah.
they're in a safe and good place.
Yeah.
And in those, hey, I'm Kathleen, welcome so much. I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much for being here. If you have any questions, just text me. I have this just short little spiel I do. It's often turned into like a really human, great
Yeah.
conversation.
Yeah.
And who doesn't benefit from spontaneous moments of connection throughout
Yeah.
our day or our week?
Yes.
So that's one level. Another level is kind of going to sound a little random, but let's
Can't
see.
wait.
My girls are up and out. They're both in college. And I had a partner for a few years when I moved to Vermont who helped me get the land up and running. But we're now apart. And so I live in this big house on this big piece of land by myself. And I've got a vibrant community life, a lot of friends. I'm dating somebody new. My life is full, but I'm living alone. And I haven't lived alone in, I don't know what, 30 years since I
Yeah.
had kids, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And my two listings are often full. And when I look out my window and I can see that the hot tub wood stove is crackling
Mm,
away, or the fire pit's in use, or the warm light is in the windows, and I know there's happy people in there with the twinkle lights on,
yeah.
having, some maple bourbon or a cup of tea and connecting with their partner, because I mostly host couples.
Yeah.
Um, that feels good.
Yeah.
Not because it impacts a feeling of loneliness or I'm not alone now. It isn't really that. It's just more, this is alive. There's a flow of life
Mm,
on this land. And yes, my kids have grown up and started their own lives. My serious living relationship ended. And yet, people are still flowing in and out and having beautiful experiences. And I get to be a part of that. And that
yeah.
feels good.
Yeah. Yeah. I could almost feel that the way that you describe it, looking out the window and seeing that happen. And it makes me really miss hosting in person and wanting to figure out a way to get back to that at some point because it is just fundamentally such a different experience. I really like what you said. There's just something small here that I actually think is not small. And you said, just to greet them and chat with them and let them know that I'm glad they're here. Letting them know that you're glad they're here. I just don't think enough hosts think about that or feel that like at their core, the gratitude that comes, right? Like we're all grateful when we get the email that's like so and so has been deposited to your bank, right? Like understanding that that's why a lot of us do this. But when you're traveling, knowing that there's a human there that you're not inconveniencing that is genuinely glad to have you fill that space feels so different than when you hesitate to send a message to a host or you worry, did I do all the checkout instructions? Am I going to get into trouble? Or you read a guest book that's like, please don't do this. Make sure you don't do this. Here are all our rules. Even if you don't mean to, it's just not sending that message of, I'm so glad that you're here. And I just wonder, I'm reflecting on my own hosting, how often I say that. Say it out
Mm,
loud to, you know what I mean? And let them feel
completely.
it. Yeah.
Well, I think it's such a great point. And I think that warmth and kindness goes a long way. And I genuinely am glad that people are there. And
Yeah.
I look for the good in people, and that helps me be glad that they're there,
Yeah.
because sometimes, the vast majority of the time, people come and they're sort of my people because I've written the listing and I've decorated the
Yeah.
space. And so, you bring in what you've
Yeah.
put out.
Yes.
But sometimes they're not my people. They feel kind of other, or they're from far away, or they're not like giving me eye contact or
Yeah.
whatever. And I really consciously cultivate remembering the innate goodness of other people,
Yeah.
especially when I don't feel connected. And that helps that warmth be genuine and not
Yeah.
manufactured. But the other piece, the kind of flip side to the coin that I think is really important, is that phrase, clear is kind.
My God, we talk about that at work all the time.
It's so important, because if
Yes.
it doesn't work for me to have people on my land, it's not going to work for them. And so, how do I balance the warmth and the welcome and the hospitality with really clear communication and
Yeah.
even boundaries? Because there's boundaries. I live on the land. How do I make
Yeah.
boundaries? I don't want people, in my bathroom or sitting in my
Right.
backyard chair.
I'm
And
glad you're here, but please don't do that.
yeah, right. So,
Yeah.
how do I welcome people and also set boundaries? And that is a more nuanced skill that's been developed over time that I think is fundamental for successful
Yeah.
hosting.
Do you have any tips on that front? Because I
I
do think that's the
guess,
trouble I'm not trying to call people out, but when I say things like, oh, your guest book is full of too many rules, I do think it can leave someone with the, I hear you, I don't want to do that. But also, like, I need them to take care of my space. I need to set boundaries for if you're going to be here. That is a very real and fair thing to do. How do we do both?
yeah, I think there's many, many layers to it. You spoke of the guest book, and that's a big one. We want people to use things safely and not break things and not be overly hard on them. And so, how do we articulate boundaries in a way that's also warm and kind?
Yeah.
And I am a writer, and so a
Oh,
lot of that comes naturally to me. But
yeah.
guess what? Chat GPT is right there to help you.
Yeah.
And you can take a rule book and put it into Chat
Mm,
GPT and give it a prompt to warm, make this warm but clear. And it actually does a great job. So
yeah.
that's one thing.
That's
What is our
great.
tone? How do we articulate
Yeah.
things? Another thing is to be comprehensive. Like I say, I have my long welcome message or my guest manual, and it says, please feel free to walk around the farm. Just avoid the private areas here and here.
Yeah.
So
So you lead with
it's
what you want them to
thorough.
do.
Yeah, lead, and that old thing about sandwiching something harder
Hmm.
in between two positive
Yeah.
things. But if people park in the wrong place, I'll call them and say, oh, hey, next time you come out, could you put and say things in a soft way, a kind way, but a clear way, I think
Yeah.
is super important.
Do you think women are better at this than men?
I think women are better at relational speech, and it's such a generalization, but I think in general it's true. And men can be better at being direct, and
Ah,
both are needed. If
yeah.
it's too direct, especially in writing, things can sound really harsh.
Yeah. And I wonder if women, I wonder, one, first, if women are better at this. I think you're right. But then second, I wonder if we're actually born to be better at it or if we are forced to be better at it because the world is harder on us when we're direct and they want us to be
Mm,
soft. And so strong, clear communication from women is often not received well. I wonder.
well, yeah,
Yeah, I'm just curious about all of these.
it's a complicated one.
Yeah, it really is. I want to go backward for 1 second because you said something else. You were talking about putting like love into it and you think that people can feel that. And someone once said to me, do we smile because we're happy or are we happy because we smile? And I
Mm,
think about that all the time when I'm feeling unhappy. I'm like, if I force myself to smile, will I feel happier? And almost every time that happens. And so I guess I wonder like if we force if we're not feeling that right, we were talking about like if we're going through a hard time, how do you still lead with like heart forward hosting if your heart might be breaking for whatever reason? And I wonder if we force ourselves to do it anyway, even when our heart is breaking, if that won't be part of the heal. Like if that, because you're saying you're just surprised constantly by people and how they show up in the best way when we might not be expecting it and how that actually can help our properties care for us.
mm. Well, I
I
think
just wonder.
that's true. I also think it's so important to honor how we really feel. And
Mm,
when we allow whatever we're feeling, especially difficult feelings, afflictive emotions like grief or loneliness or insecurity and all the harder feelings that we all carry around, when we honor that without inflating it, when we let it be
mm,
there, I think we're in better relationship with ourselves, which helps when we're walking out on the driveway on a sad day and people are arriving for their vacation. I
yeah.
don't need to be fake. I don't need to be animated if I don't feel it. But if I'm honoring myself, it helps me honor others and just show up in an authentic
Mm,
way and as a loving human being who
yeah.
remembers that those people are wanting to have a sweet time and feel safe
Yeah.
and comfortable.
Yeah. That is a good push for this Enneagram 7 who doesn't like any hard feelings. So, of course, My thought when you said those things was, oh, I remember someone told me to smile once and I would be happy. All the hard things would go away. And that is a good reminder that maybe that is not always the answer.
Well, that fake it till you make it has some merit for sure. And what you're pointing to that I also believe is that not even most, all of what we experience is filtered through our patterns and our worldviews, which are pretty much made up. And I do try and remember that sometimes and just come back to, my core belief that people are good and we're all connected to one another and we all want to recognize that and live that.
Yeah. Yeah. You and I spoke a couple weeks ago and we talked about the unicorn, the workhorse, and the donkey, which was just on the podcast a couple episodes ago. If you didn't listen to that one, it would be a good one to revisit.
Heard that one.
Yeah. And for anyone else listening, that's a good one. It was my first solo episode, so I'm a little nervous about it. I haven't promoted it much, but I did that so that when I reference it, I can send people back to it in case they haven't listened to it. And one of the things you and I talked about that I think about a lot now is this idea of when we think unicorn property, we will often think highest end, fanciest build, nicest finishes, Egyptian cotton sheets, that in order to be a unicorn, you have to spend the most money on all of the things. And that is how you get to unicorn status. And your property is a retreat, to your point, without the highest end new builds. You have, why am I blanking on the name now? Yurts. You have yurts on your property. Is that correct? Yeah.
One yurt and one cottage.
And one cottage. Okay. And yet you are creating this unicorn property. And so I kind of would love to chat about that a little bit, the pieces of it that really make it a unicorn, to push people to think beyond just, oh, I need to buy the most expensive couch and that will make me a unicorn. How do you think about this?
Oh, another awesome question. I would rather have the most thoughtfully made grass-fed hamburger than a slapdash steak all day long.
Yeah.
And I do not have the highest end finishes in my space. We use Target threshold 100% cotton sheets, and they are awesome. They're cotton, they last, they're white, they're affordable, and they're comfortable. So I think what makes a place, to use your lovely criteria, of unicorn, is that special is the intentionality behind it and the care. And I often think of the word tend, is you can feel when you walk into a place, is it tended?
Yeah.
Is your cleaning helper tending it? Does she or he care what it feels like in there?
Yeah.
Because I feel like whoever's in there with their hands on the place is affecting, not to sound too woo, but they're affecting the energy, they're affecting the way it looks and feels. And you can tell if somebody cares, the same way as when you go into a deli or a supermarket or a cafe and you order, say, some kind of sandwich of, turkey, avocado, and pickle sandwich. If it's thrown together or it's made nicely with care, it's a whole different experience. And you can tell in a space for sure. And so there's lots of things that we do, that I do to make a place feel tended. One is houseplants. I have a lot of really beautiful, cared for, healthy houseplants, and there's no dead leaves on them. And the saucers aren't full of mucky old water.
Yeah. Those are small details, to your point, though, that tells someone. And often if it's tended, you don't consciously think it, but you feel it. But you feel it. Definitely notice when it's not tended.
100%. Or like I bought all these dishes from kind of a high-end company that I won't name. And within a year, they were all chipped. And I took them out. And, I don't want stuff with chips on it. Who wants to drink their coffee out of a chip mug? Not me.
Yeah.
So things like that, I think, go a long way.
Yeah.
How are the beds made? That's huge. Like, we carefully make the beds.
Do you clean in between stays, or do you have someone who helps you?
I have an amazing woman who has been helping me for 5 years now, and she is a make or break part of my business, and
I totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah.
And shout out to Tammy, who might be listening to this. She listens more than my own dad. But I do think I think that's a big part of the reason Cozy Rock's been so successful. And I don't think I've like said that out loud ever, but it is, she is so intentional about everything she does in between stays and gets frustrated if it's left messy, not because it's more work, but because she's worried about not getting it up to the same standard for the next guest, right? It feels personal, like, wait, but I still have to take care of the next guest that's coming in here and I need it to be just as good. But I feel like, how did you find her slash train her slash keep her?
Yeah, great question and super important. I found her because when I first was looking at adding the retreats onto my land, I talked to another woman in my little town who was doing really well. She has her own
Oh,
tiny house. It's a unicorn. It's called Honeycrisp Cottage. People love it. And she very generously shared her experience with me.
mm,
And she shared the name of my helper and her helper. And we got to know each other. I am pretty thorough about documentation. So I made a whole document with photographs of this is what the bed should look like. This is what the
uh-huh.
bathroom should look like. And, bullet points under
Yeah.
each. And after, a few months, she just made it her own. Her standards are
Yeah.
higher than mine are. But
That's how Tammy is too.
the most important thing is how do I keep her? And
Yeah.
I keep her sort of in the same way I think we do well with our guests. And that is, I really love her.
Yeah.
I care
Yeah.
about her. I
Yeah.
know a bit about her personal experience in her life. I show up for her. I talk to her. I cultivate a relationship with her. And more than anything, I express my appreciation to her constantly.
Yeah.
And are things perfect? Have we had, things happen between us at times? For sure. And
Yeah.
and then I go out of my way to talk to her about it, or she comes to me and we talk about it. And we just have a good relationship because we both
Yeah.
contribute to it. And I don't treat it like a transaction.
I
Like
was literally thinking it doesn't sound transactional at all.
it's not, it's relational. And I really appreciate and care for her. And she makes my business tick. I wouldn't be able to do it without her.
Kathleen, it just feels like the more we talk, the more I might be convinced that you just can't teach this.
I think you can.
But that level of care, like someone, and I think most people listening to this podcast are in this camp where they have what it takes to do this. But if someone's like taking notes and they're like, okay, really, really care about them, make sure you say thank you a lot, right? Like that is something that like you probably didn't have to think about. You just do it. You know
I
what I mean?
think it helps to be a naturally caring person. And I guess I
Yeah.
happen to believe that most people are naturally caring if they
There you go.
choose
Yes.
to come into relationship with that part of themselves. However, what isn't teachable, I think, is the degree to which people are tuned into details. That feels
Yeah.
like kind of a set point. And if you're not tuned into details and you're cleaning or you're decorating
Yep.
a space, you probably won't do as well.
Yeah.
I mean, we have lists with every detail, and that makes all the difference. We can't
Yeah.
forget stuff or it won't work
Right.
as well.
Right. Right. And the only bad cleaning reviews I've ever gotten have been when I cleaned one of my places because I can relate to that. It's just a blind spot. It's like I just literally didn't even see that thing because it doesn't register with me.
Yeah.
And so it's just like, okay, this is something I will never do. Even if I'm the one leaving, I'm not going to be the one cleaning it. I'm going to hire someone who has that detail to
He's
do
more
that.
detail oriented than I am. So I really value that.
Yeah, I think that's a good place to kind of start to wrap up because so much of this does leave me feeling like it's not teachable and you either are this kind of person or you're not. But I really like the push you just gave me of most people actually have this in us. It's a matter of how much we have on top of it from years of experiences. And I remember when I taught middle school, I taught at a really cool school, and the principal was a huge believer in growth mindset. And so we could never make permanent statements as the teaching staff. So if we said like that kid, oh, well, that kid's not going to Harvard. I taught high school at one point, and she would always, no matter, I swear if she was on the other side of the building, you could hear her go, yet, she's not going to Harvard
Oh,
yet. Just this idea
oh,
that anybody has it in them. And it's just a matter of figuring out the things that are getting in the way or the things that you need help with in order to get there. So I really like that. And so I used to, when we were on field trips, I would take pictures of my students when they were sleeping on the bus, because if they
oh.
were really difficult students, it would remind me, like if I was having a bad day, I would look at those pictures and it would remind me that all kids are good at their core. They're all good. And it's just there's stuff that comes up that makes them make poor choices in class or in life or otherwise. And I think that's also true for the humans that we host and for the humans that are hosting.
Yes, I think you're right. And we all make poor choices sometimes, and we all act like a jerk sometimes,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
I think we all know intuitively that when people are really behaving poorly, they're usually really hurting. And
Yeah.
so I've had very
Mm.
few experiences of people behaving poorly in our retreats, but I have had, back from that, people not making eye contact or people being sort of abrupt or even borderline rude. And when that happens, I kind of take it as a personal challenge to just meet them with more warmth. And what I'm struck by is it really, really flippin' works.
Yeah.
People want to be, you know, thought well of, they want to connect. And you said a phrase when we were talking the other day that I really loved, which is generosity of spirit. And if we can cultivate a generosity of spirit, if we can assume good intent, it people tend to like meet that bar.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I feel like if everybody just listens to one podcast, I want it to be this one, because I just feel like this is so, like, mindset wise, it's so foundational in how we host. And what you're communicating is so different than what new Airbnb hosts see when they join Facebook groups. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just fundamentally different the way that you're approaching your guests versus the way that a lot of people approach their guests. And to your point, I don't think it's because they necessarily don't have it in them, but that's what they're seeing. The resource that is accessible is that Airbnb Facebook group, and they're seeing it from other people. And so they're learning how to be angry or resentful or mad at guests instead of how do I greet them with
Yeah.
extra warmth?
I too am members of those Airbnb Facebook groups, and I've learned a lot of good things there. And one of the not so great things that I've learned is a lot of people make their guests into the enemy. And if you do that, you're not going to have a nice time, because that's going to come through in a million ways. And what you're pointing to, Janice, is really, this is a microcosm of our larger transactional capitalistic culture. Hey, we've all got to pay the rent. We've all got to eat. We've got to take care of our kids. We need money to live. And look where capitalism has gotten us.
Right.
It has not
Right.
served us, and we've lost a lot. And when we come back to fundamental human values like interdependence and respect and generosity of spirit and genuine care and warmth, things tend to work better. That's just true.
Yeah. I have nothing to add to that. That's better than that as a place to end. I want everyone to listen to this, Kathleen. Thank you so much for joining me.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me. It's been a joy.
Thanks so much for joining us. And if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.